Well, the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine rolls into town for its Hungaroring round ahead of round 4 of the 2025 Championship. And it has been a highly competitive and certainly a fast and furious start to the campaign, with several different race winners ushering from all parts of the grid. Coming into the weekend, it is of course Freddie Slater holding all the cards after a tremendous run at the start of the campaign, with wins at both Zandvoort and Spa to take him through to this Hungaroring round. Elsewhere on the grid, though, Matteo De Paolo arrives here looking to take a second race win, and he could yet get it. Starting on pole position ahead of race 1 here this weekend. We welcome you all to Hungaroring around this 4.381 kilometre circuit here at Magyarország in Hungary. This will be taken place over 30 minutes plus 1 lap. We look forward to taking you around this as well, folks. Your commentator here, George Morgan, to take you through the weekend. And after what was certainly a stellar entry into the weekend after a brilliant Q1 where Pedro Cleiro, right from the get-go, looked to have the upper hand coming off the back of Group A's run in qualifying 1. But it was then Matteo De Paolo, the first ever winner, or should we say the first winner this season after taking race 1 victory back at Misano. He's going to look to try and stand on the top step once again. But there are plenty of other contenders to that throne. Of course, Pedro Cleiro, our most recent race winner, with Van Amersfoort coming off the back of their most successful weekend so far this campaign, with both Pedro Cleiro winning in race 2 and Hayu Yamakoshi taking successive P2s in both races in the Zandvoort round. Of course, that is in conjunction with the round prior, where of course he did take victory back at, well, not victory, but runner-up spot in Spa as well. So could the tide be turning for Van Amersfoort? We will, of course, find out as the weekend progresses. But we've had many changes across the grid as well. We featured many of them during the course of qualifying. G4 Racing with 2 new additions to their team in the form of Edu Robinson and Enzo Richer. Of course, they do have quite a bit of work to do, mainly Enzo Richer starting on the back row of the grid, but elsewhere, a little bit further up, Edu Robinson in his first weekend in this series, looking to get a good start from 26th place on the grid. Elsewhere, we do have Javier Segura moving up into the Formula Regional again. We'll quickly run you through the starting grid ahead of race 1. Matteo De Paolo starts on pole for the first time for Trident in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine, and lines up alongside last time out race winner Pedro Cleiro for Van Amersfoort Racing. Rashid El Dahiri in 3rd. Enzo Delini starts in 4th. Evan Gilter in 5th, looking for an upturn in his form. Freddie Slater starting from 6th, our current championship leader. Hayu Yamakoshi in 7th. Akshay Bora in 8th. Jack Beaton in 9th. Nanavid Birimbakti in 10th, with Nikita Bedrin in 11th. Ruiki Lu starts in P12 for Trident. Of course, had to take a 2-place grid drop. Kanato Lei starting in 13th, ahead of Taito Kato, his fellow ART teammate. Dion Gauda, highest placed rookie in the championship, in 15th, alongside Jin Nakamura, who was fastest in free practice 1 over the weekend. Dorian Pan for Bremer in 17th, alongside newcomer Ian Eichmans in his first start in F3 machinery. Zachary David returns to the sport, this time with CL Motorsport in 19th. Rui Hengye for RPM in 20th. Giovanni Maschio in 21st, with Michael Belov in 22nd as well. Javier Segura in 23rd. Aditya Kulkarni for Axel GP as well in 24th place. Yaroslav Vasalaho starting in 25th, alongside Edu Robinson. Edouard Borgner 27th. Sakir Al-Malshari in 28th, and Enzo Richer starts on the back row of the grid alongside returning Maya Berg, who is fresh out of the F1 Academy Championship, now with the Santaloc team for this weekend. There was indeed another driver, just talking about the 2-place grid spot for Ruiki Lu. That was due to an obstruction caused by him during qualifying, failing to leave a clean racing line. So the stewards felt that it was worth dropping Ruiki Lu 2 places on the grid. And the same was given to Nikita Bedrin for the same reason as well, causing an obstruction during qualifying. So a 2-place grid drop went his way, which now means, of course, he'll be starting from P11 on the grid as the formation lap now gets underway. And we have got quite a few of our title protagonists featuring up inside this top 10 and in the higher echelons of this grid. Matteo De Paolo, of course, we mentioned his form at the very start of the season, gifting Trident their first win in the championship, which is unbelievable. Of course, we've been running since 2021. And, of course, coming here now, first weekend actually featuring here at Hungaroring, being 2022, where we saw Kaz Havercourt winning for Van Amersfoort Racing in race 1. Hadrian David, who of course is here this weekend, representing R-Race GP. We've mentioned R-Race's incredible form around this circuit with Tucker Tappenden clean sweeping the weekend back last season. And then, of course, Martinia Stenshorn back in 2023, taking pole in Q1 and then successive victories in race 1 and race 2 as well, also for RSGP. But an interesting topic of note is that every driver that has won here at Hungaroring has not gone on to win the title. Of course, Rafael Camara not winning around this circuit last year. That was, of course, Tucker Tappenden. Back in 2023, Andrea Kimi Antonelli failed to win around this circuit where Martinia Stenshorn did. And then, of course, Dina Beganovic back in 2022, of course, becoming champion, did not win in the 2022 occasion we went racing around this circuit. And, of course, we did not come here the year when Gregoire Saucy went on to win the title in 2021. But we could be on course to writing a new chapter this year with Matteo De Paolo still very much in Championship League contention. And now Pedro Clero starting on the front row, fresh off the back of Zandvoort. Like we said, very successful for a home race weekend for the Van Amersfoort team. He's going to look to get a big run down through towards turn 1 at a very heavy braking point that can offer so much to the drivers if they get a good, decent launch. And I know that Danielle Gilles was very happy after what she saw in our last round. The team boss, of course, of Van Amersfoort Racing, Hayu Yamakoshi, don't forget him either. Starting 7th on the grid, looking for a big start, but he's going to have to try and get past Freddie Slater, our current championship leader, who has made a real name for himself in this series already. He's already secured 2 race wins, not to mention several podiums. He has done a sensational job at the top of the tree. Wins coming both at Spa and Zandvoort. Now places him on 83 points at the top of the championship and ahead of Matteo De Paolo, who is just down in 2nd place. But De Paolo prudent, despite not getting another race win since Misano at race 1 to open up the season. There have been some really, really strong podium performances at both Misano in race 2 and, of course, Spa in race 1 as well. Zandvoort, while it wasn't necessarily podium contention, he took 8 points in both races and therefore will feature 2nd in the championship, just ahead of Enzo Dellini, who took his first win of the season back at Spa as well in a back-to-back podium weekend. As now we watch as the cars line up onto the back of the grid. A couple of the 2 RPMs now moving to the back. There's the CL Motorsport familiar colours of the orange and blue for the new team that joined us this season. The spectators reveling in the sunshine that we have at this now brand new, newly renovated circuit here at Hungaroring, ready for the Hungarian Grand Prix that's set to come into play later on in the year. Of course, this weekend, they're all racing at Silverstone at the moment. Many of the contenders that, of course, raced here in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine. Marshall waving the green flag. In the background, here come the lights. All 5 lights are lit. And it's pedal to the metal, and it is go, 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 go. Great starts all round. Doesn't look like there's any issues right from the start, but Matteo De Paolo, I think, might have the edge here on the run down through towards turn 1. Indeed, he will. Pedro Clero might yet come under fire because Rashid El Dahiri is having a look around the outside. An aggressive line taken from Enzo Dellini up the inside as well. He's pounced on Rashid El Dahiri and has moved up into 3rd as well. A couple of cars now escaping to the right-hand side. That's definitely a Prema further back as they now sweep through in towards turn 2. Clero under attack straight away as they now come through the first sector. Great start from Matteo De Paolo, and just look at that from Clero, just covering off that inside as they come out of turn 3 this time. Further back, you can just see the 11 of Jin Nakamura, car getting onto the grass. That looks like it might be an ART that has found its way onto the grass side by side as well, between an R-Race and also a Sansalok just getting caught up on the off-road there, as well as the 45 of Jack Beaton sweeps around the outside, currently in 10th place. They now come into the chicane, coming in towards turns 6 and 7 now, side by side as well further up. Once again, it looks like it might be Beaton. Once again, looking to lay down the hammer. Yes, it certainly is. Wasn't successful on that occasion, though, however. I think it was Akshay Bora he was tying up with, coming out of turn 6 and 7 now through turn 8. A car sweeping off at the side. Now, that looked like it might have been Ruiki Liu, just running a little bit wide of the mark, coming through the very, very fast-paced turn 11. Of course, you've got to be really keen on your throttle action coming through that middle sector. It's so technical. Many of the drivers obviously needing to have their wits about them. And there again, the Trident moving off the track. That is Ruiki Liu. And that's the 2nd time he's done that already in the middle to last sector as well, is side by side with a CL Motorsport driver. Of course, we mentioned Zachary David joining the team. This, incidentally, though, is Michael Belov, who is back in the orange and blue once again. Just look at Matteo De Paolo, though. He is absolutely streaming off. More cars running wide around the final corner at turn 14 as they now hustle down through towards turn 1. There is the 27 of Slater, who is already up one place ahead of Hayu Yamakoshi at the moment. An aggressive line taken again by what looked to be the CL Motorsport car. Now, that might have been the sister one of Zachary David as they come down in towards the first sector, weaving through turns 2, 3, and later turn 4 at the top of the hill. Now, and it's Matteo De Paolo that's going to hit the heights first. He's nursing a gap now of 1.5 seconds, and he's just gone purple again in the first sector as well, and he's keeping hold of it. He's just had it lost, though, by Akshay Bora, who has just pinched that away. But we are now moving on to the next lap of asking, and obviously one in the bag. This, of course, being the second one now as they come through into the middle sector. Just licking those Pirelli tyres over those curves as well. They're going to have their wits about them to really mastermind their way around this circuit. Very tricky to overtake here at Hungaroring, but the drivers still love it, just given the nature of the variation of the cornering. But on top of that, also the elevation changes. There's plenty of it throughout the course of this course, in no less the first sector, definitely the most dynamic portion of this track. And as you can see from the grid progression, Gilles down 2 places as well, down to the 7th. I mentioned it's been a tough season so far at this early midpoint part. Let's take a look at a replay from the start again. Just look at this from Enzo Dellini, just up the inside in the 23, was trying to hustle Pedro Clero for that second place. And they know how integral the start of the race truly is. Contact there between the CL Motorsport and the RPM as they made their way in towards turn 1. Not quite sure which of them that was. There's the ART going wide and onto the grass. So unlike the R-Race GP that ventured off just briefly, that being, I think, Akshay Bora. I think that was the 31. Actually, as we look on our screen, yes, it was Akshay Bora just coming back onto the track. And there was Ruiki Liu in one of 2 off-track ventures that he, of course, had as well. A little bit of debris flying off. Now, that looks like it's green. That might have come off an RPM car, I think. And there was a little bit of movement out on track heading down in towards turn 1. But obviously, all the cars just trying to jostle for position for this very early stage of the race. It is still Matteo De Paolo, who's out in front now by 1.8 seconds. Pedro Clero still in second. Still a grand portion of this race still to go, and anything can truly happen. Who watches Ruiki Liu makes his way around the next right-hander, chasing after Jin Nakamura into turn 5. This is the number 7 of Nandavid Bhirombhakdi, who is also looking to gain a place. Was actually relatively sharp in qualifying, really put on a good display as now Rashid Al Dahiri comes under pressure from Freddie Slater. 2 Premers now locking horns, of course, whilst they are teammates, still rivals at heart as well. Rashid also pushing for the top placings in the championship, arrives into this round 8th at the moment as they look to battle over 4th. And I can tell you, apparently a false start is being investigated after the race against car 35. That's Edu Robinson in his first start in this race and in this championship as well. So not the best or boldest start for the G4 team, who bring in a young rookie into the championship this time. Of course, Edu Robinson hailing from Mancor in Spain, as now Dellini gets a little bit closer, and a late move down the inside here from Enzo Dellini, as now Pedro Clero sweeps through, very close to contact coming out of turn 1, and Pedro Clero sweeps back through and takes second place back. But that was a harem-scarum moment. Now, I can tell you, lap 1 incident between drivers 74 as well as 21, 11 and 9 will be investigated after the race as well. So that is Ian Eichmann's in the 74, the 21 belonging to Rui Heng. We've got the 11 as well of Jin Nakamura, and the 9 as well of Zachary David. So there's 4 drivers there that are going to be investigated after the race for a lap 1 incident. I can imagine that it might be the big tussle that we had coming out of the first sector into the second sector, but we will find out for you folks as time draws on. As we now make our way through the middle to latter sector again, De Paolo once again pulling out some incredible laps here so far. The delta between himself and Pedro Clero has grown outwards to 2.5 seconds now already, and it's another fastest lap of the race for Matteo De Paolo as well. Though I will say this, Akshay Bora not afraid of hitting the purple marks either. He stole the purple first sector on this lap away from Matteo De Paolo, and he's currently giving chase after Evan Gilles at the moment. Of course, we know that our race have certainly pulled off some phenomenal results in the past here at Magyarország in Hungary. Here at Hungaroring, we're definitely going to be in with a real treat for the rest of the weekend. Of course, this is only one half of our planned action, our scheduled action to bring you across the weekend. Also another qualifying session to bring you tomorrow to set the grid up for race 2 as well. But so far, for Matteo De Paolo, this is a dream start and potentially another victory in hand for Trident should he keep this up. And I got a chance to speak to him as well as he ushers in yet another fastest lap of the race here and now with a 1:39.374. Now heading uphill through towards turn 4 now at the top of the hill. Very fast paced. He'll just flick the car in this very tight section and then a progressive right-hander. And I did ask about the tyre wear as well. Given the increasing nature of the temperature, we're sat at a staggering 52.6 track temperature so far. And I asked Matteo, how do you think the tyres are going to perform this weekend? He said it is going to be difficult. Obviously, as time goes on, as the heat starts to propel itself through the tyre, it's not as easy, as qualifying in a sense, because with qualifying, it's one lap, essentially. But you've got to try and carry this Pirelli rubber right through an entire 30-minute race, which is going to be very tricky for the drivers to cope with. And it's not enough that the track temperature is high, but also the air temperature, which is now stood at 27.3. So plenty for the drivers to manage here, trying to maintain the grip levels on the compound. They don't want to certainly shoot the shot too early and basically overcook it to then cause them problems for later on in the race, or either that the weekend. They come through the final corner once more to begin the next lap. 21 minutes and 33 to go. Matteo De Paolo with a very strong start, and now the gap has marched out to 3 seconds and beyond, nearly 3.2 in fact. It was Rashid Al Lahiri fastest in the first sector over the last lap. He's now managed to gather himself to the back of Enzo Dellini. A big sharp move this time by the 30. Oh my goodness, Akshay Bora launching up the inside of Evan Giltaire in their big fight at turn 1. Of course, Bora's been threatening to get closer with the odd purple sector or two, and it's now brought him into proximity of Evan Giltaire so far, who is still 7/10 away from Hayu Yamakoshi at the moment. If anything, that's given the Van Amersfoort driver, Hayu Yamakoshi, some breathing room, and he can now focus on trying to catch Freddie Slater, who is 1.3 in front, and indeed that has cost Giltaire quite a number, nearly 7/10 of a second. In fact, he's 1.5 seconds away from Yamakoshi right now. So obviously that's allowed Akshay Bora to shake the field up somewhat and maybe leave Evan Giltaire slightly vulnerable here, because of course he won't benefit from a slipstream. There'll be no tow. Of course, remember, they do have the push-to-pass system active that they can use through the course of this race. But again, they'll be managing that as well to ensure that they don't run out of those before the final lap of the race, because it could well be required for them to defend their spots on the classification. As now Matteo De Paolo comes around turn 14 this time. The Italian, of course, representing Maurizio Salvadori's Trident team. And I got a chance to speak to the Trident organisation earlier on, and they were delighted with how things formed up. Obviously, they were a little bit disappointed that obviously Ruiki Liu wasn't able to marshal off a great effort in quali. It was, he gave a good account, and I must say they were full of praise of their other two young drivers, with Nandavad Birambakti also putting on a very, very smart early display at the start of qualifying. There could be more to come from those two in the races that are to come. Of course, Nandavad Birambakti coming in to this round 15th in the championship. Now they stream down through turn 3 and take the run up through towards turn 4. Pedro Clearo also managing to marshal the gap well against Enzo Dellini so far, and this is the gap over the last lap. 67 thousandths quicker was Enzo Dellini over the last lap, and this time it's been responded to by Clearo. Last lap again was a fastest lap for Matteo De Paolo. Again, he's 3.8 clear now and really starting to push his car into gear. Dion Gowder, also the leading rookie at the moment. There's his teammate, the number 6 of Hayu Yamakoshi. The Japanese talent, once again, out on track for the Amber and Black Army. They now flourish around this latter sector at this Hungaroring circuit. The 18-year-old Hayu Yamakoshi, hailing from Japan. Of course, in recent times, Italian F4 is where he's really shown off his talents, finishing 3rd in the championship with 2 wins and 7 podiums. And that was with the Van Amersfoort Racing team as well, also featuring in Euro 4. Arriving with the same VAR team for the FRECA Championship this season, but even prior to that, really showed off some really good skills back in 2023 on his single-seater debut in the F4 United Arab Emirates with Pinnacle, and then of course French F4, Spanish F4 with appearances, but it was really Italian F4 where his talents really came to light. But he's also proven himself in karting as well, dating all the way back in 2020 in the Army series in Japan in the X30 Juniors, finishing third in the series. Now looking to raise the stakes here. 6th place at the moment. At the moment, Van Amersfoort could be clinching some really important points. And following suit from a brilliant round at Zandvoort, this is not a bad way to follow up, but no one can hold a candle to Matteo De Parlo at the moment. He's in a world of his own right now. 4 seconds up the road from Pedro Clero. And his championship form has been brilliant. In some stages, he showed his weakest form at Zandvoort with 8 points gathered across the 2 races. But when you take that into account of a whole championship, I mean, 8 points can make a huge difference between you winning and losing a series. So I'm sure he won't be too disappointed with that. We now take a look at a replay. So this is the Axel GP driver, the 44 of Javier Segrera, and a move up the inside by the RPM of Enzo Yer. And next up, the 96 Santaloc racing car. Oh, my goodness. What must have been contact there? The 16 of Sakir Al-Maushari, and it's still at a standstill on the side of the road here with 16 minutes and 32 to go. A yellow flag is up at turn 3, and by the looks of it, Sakir Al-Maushari can't get it started again. Important to note, Ian Eichmans as well in his first start, also in the pits, as now we see Rashid El Dahiri going very defensive, and that's going to open the door here for Freddie Slater. The 2 Premas now are going to go wheel to wheel over an improved position now. Side by side, safety car has been deployed, so I don't know how this is going to work out. You probably have to forego the place. A lock up here from Freddie Slater. The yellow flags are out, so he has to slow up the car, and therefore he'll have to put his attack on standby for now. But that was a great opportunity for Freddie Slater, as we can just see the stricken Axel GP car of Sakir Al-Maushari just pushed over to the right-hand side of our screen as it makes its way out of turn 3 in towards turn 4. So has pulled it over to a safe place for now. Obviously, still the requirement of the safety car to come out. Now, this has neutralised that massive gap that Matteo De Parlo had put together. So he's going to be very frustrated that this has occurred, obviously, given the nature of the fact that now his lead is going to be in jeopardy. Race is essentially going to be back on here between himself and Pedro Clero. And what you've got to ask yourself, what on earth is that early burst of pace going to do to Pedro or to Matteo De Parlo's tyres? As now we see Sakir Al-Maushari now stepping out of his car, wheel in hand. He will reattach it to the chassis. We'll take a look at the moment again. It was that was the 96 Santaloc, totally unrelated. It looked like contact with the number 2 of Edouard Borgner from G4 Racing. And a little bit of gesturing there by the looks of it from Sakir Al-Maushari. Very frustrated, clearly. And can imagine for good reason, just coming under a swarm of G4 cars. And now in a safe spot over the barrier as the marshals look to go and address the car that is currently sat at turn 3. But Sakir Al-Maushari, unfortunately, losing out there for the Axel team. The young Q80, who comes in from Saudi F4, where he took part in the Meritus GP as well, finishing 5th place in that. Took a victory in the Saudi F4 Championship last year with 5 podiums and 2 pole positions. And now taking part in European competition, which basically opens up the number of drivers and the types of drivers you meet. Essentially, you see them all coming through the various parts of Europe and indeed internationally. Of course, we've got the best of everything pretty much, with a fantastic sort of group of phenomenal Japanese and Chinese drivers now coming in. Obviously, Japanese most notably, with the likes of Jin Nakamura and, of course, Hayu Yamakoshi. Incidentally, Jin Nakamura, remember, fastest in collective test 1 through the course of the weekend. Appreciate that we, obviously, as you'd expect, surpassed the lap time that he put in of a 1:39.242 in qualifying. But it was a great display from Nakamura. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite panned out the same way during the course of the race. Currently sitting 15th fast. We also can't forget Taito Kato as well, or Kanato Lei. You know, 2 drivers that have come in and for ART, looking to establish themselves in European competition. Taito Kata, of course, young 17-year-old from Takemi in Japan, and part of the Honda Racing School. Joined the Honda Racing School at Suzuka in 2023 after a brilliant karting career. Of course, his Honda supported, and took part in French F4, ultimately winning the championship, making his single-seater debut last year, and taking 5 wins and 12 podiums to boot as well, joining ART for Formula Regional Middle Eastern Championship, which is, of course, where his teammate, Evan Gilter, went on to win the title, beating back, of course, Freddie Slater as well to take that one. Kanato Lei, of course, another driver hailing from Japan. Has had a spirited career since jumping in single-seaters, racing in British F4 in 2023, debuted with Elite Motorsports as well in Ginetta Juniors back in 2022 with 2 wins and 5 podiums, but moving to ART for the Formula Regional Middle Eastern Championship and FRECA as well, much like his teammate Taito Kato and also fellow teammate Evan Gilter. But at the moment for the ART team, their highest spot is 7th with Gilter at the moment, so they're going to need a big restart here from him. As the safety car continues around the track, the rest of the field now start to bunch up together. Just saw the CL Motorsport car of Michael Belov as well back in the car this time. It was, other place gains elsewhere. I mean, there's been quite a tenacious battle over the top 10 spots, like trying to get into the top 10, I should say. Nikita Bedrin currently holding on to 10th place right now. Of course, recovering from the 2-place grid drop. And now seemingly battling with Jack Beaton when the restart gets back underway. There is Bedrin now in the number 10 Santot. The safety car can confirm in this lap, folks, so we will get back underway very, very soon. But at the moment, Matteo De Palo is in front, but how are those tyres after really putting in some really hefty fast laps through the course of the early stint? Obviously, the idyllic thing in his mind is that the safety car will deplete a fair bit of the race time, just leaving little by little opportunity for the drivers to potentially hustle their way past him. Of course, Clearo, though, I can imagine he's going to look to put up a good fight, and a really good restart is going to make all the difference here. And no doubt Freddie Slater in a bid to try and loft himself into 4th place with a potential move for 3rd on Delaney. Could be in the offing. We're going to see a mass battle, I can imagine, between these drivers all featuring in the top end of the championship. Of course, Slater being the highest one at the moment, but with the points gap between Slater and De Palo standing at 1 as it stands coming into the weekend. 83 points for Slater, 82 for Matteo De Palo. One right result for Matteo De Palo will shift the tide of this title battle in the hands of the Trident driver who sits at the top of the shop right now. The safety car will be coming in now shortly. We're inside the final 10 minutes, not forgetting, plus 1 lap as soon as the timer ticks to 0. And the Trident driver, Matteo De Palo, will effectively become the safety car now, getting us back underway. The yellow still wave, very soon they'll wave green. Pedro Clearo will be all over the tail of the Trident in front, with Enzo Delaney also looking for his chance now. Where does the push to pass come into all this now as they come around the final corner? And it will be pedal to the metal for the 2nd time in this race now. And it certainly will be Matteo De Palo leading the way down through towards turn 1. We see Pedro Clearo just a little faint to the inside there. We see Enzo Delaney also doing the same. In comes Freddie Slater. A look at the inside here on Rashid Al Dahiri, who leaves a small avenue as now we see, oh my goodness, now that looks like Jack Beaton, if I'm not mistaken. Beaton, I think, just going very wide through turn 1, and he's lost a fleet of places, coming toe-to-toe with Nikita Bedrin through towards turn 1. So that is not ideal at all for the young man from Australia, from the Gold Coast. Certainly not a golden moment, as now he looks to try and recover the damage that's been done to lift himself through the order. Looks like he's stacked between 2 ART cars. Now that will be probably Kanato Lei in front of him, and it certainly is. He's 13th now in this classification. So hardship there for Beaton, who is now shuffled outside of the points. And that throws Bedrin up again, another spot. Obviously, I'm not quite sure what had occurred there, but definitely looked like there was some really aggressive side-by-side action. But Bedrin, no harm, no foul. He's now chasing after Nandavid Birampakdi over 9th place, who we just saw in shot coming out of turn 6 and 7 and in towards turn 8. As we now watch as Pedro Clearo once again looks to give chase on Mathieu de Palou, who has broken away again. I have to say this, half a second, another wide moment. That time, I think that might have been for Freddie Slater, just drifting a little bit wide of the mark. He's really trying to push here on the back of Rashid El Dahiri, who's giving him a good race so far. Though Slater did have his chance. Of course, that led to the battle just as the safety car came out. And you never know, his time may come. There's still plenty of time in the race for something to occur. We just saw in shot there as well, Jack Peter making his way through turn 14. He is, I'm sure, seething at what has certainly occurred there. Coming through turn 1, we're not quite sure really as to where it really is instigated from, but now Slater's under attack, because here comes now Hayu Yamakoshi around the outside. These two will know each other very well from Italian F4 the year before, and now Slater, who's looking to defend this position now. No longer is he the aggressor up against Rashid El Dahiri, but Yamakoshi is going to push his buttons all the way through turn 3. A battle now erupting as well, just in behind with the 95. Also on the attack of Evan Gilter, but I think he's more defensive-minded. Akshay Bora is pushing him all the way as they now climb up through towards turn 4 this time. They're going to go wheel to wheel on the run up through towards turn 5 as well. Who's going to be the better man in this exchange? It looks like Evan Gilter has managed to fend off the impending attack from Akshay Bora. It's now a 1/10 of a second between those two now, and that's going to be glued together, I think, especially for the ending of this race. Definitely signs from Akshay Bora that there's more in the tank here, and I have to say, he can only be encouraged with the fast laps that he has produced. I must say Mathieu de Palou has not let up at all already. Now that gap has gone out to 1.3, so again, trying to break that slipstream away from Pedro Clearo, and now it's 1.5. Rashid El Dahiri also 1.2 now away from Enzo Dellini, which opens an opportunity now for Freddie Slater also to once again attack his own teammates in a bid to further his championship standing. Obviously, the big concern on Slater's mind, he wants to reduce the damage that this deficit in points could encourage, with De Paolo now currently leading the race. Remember, only a point between them coming into this first race of the weekend. So it will throw advantage into the corner of Mathieu de Palou in the first half of this Hungaroring race weekend, as they now come down through towards turn 1. Clearo with a slight lock-up there on the front right. And that again will only encourage Enzo Dellini, who of course was a race winner back at Spa-Francorchamps in race 2, following up from a brilliant P3 podium visit. One can only imagine that there's more to come from young Enzo Dellini, part of course of the Red Bull Junior program last year. And now, since moving out of that situation, of course still with R-Race GP, and obviously working with the team to try and improve his current standing. And looking ahead to the rest of this weekend, obviously he'll have in mind his own results to ponder to try and encourage his own title or championship position. Now, he's on 75 points coming into the weekend, which is currently 7 off Mathieu de Palou. But more importantly, he'll be taking points off Freddie Slater as well. So this is going to be an aggressive switch-up, I think, inside this top 3 at the moment. Evan Gilter on 67 points coming into the weekend too. If we take a look at the difference between Clearo and Dellini, 4/10, and at the moment it's closing. So now we see Clearo coming through turn 13. Big gap then. Rashid El Dahiri nearly 2 seconds away from Dellini now. This is getting closer now to the front nose cone of the Prema of Freddie Slater, the Italian F4 champion. Was breaking all the records put in place by Andrea Kimi Antonelli and Dennis Hauger. Very well prudent at the hands of a single-seater race car. Has proven himself to be a budding champion in waiting, potentially in this series, but he's going to come under close fire, as is the 22 of Pedro Clearo. Again, Dellini runs wide, and Clearo back up the inside, coming through turn 1, will retake P2, but again, another one fired in from Enzo Dellini. He's trying to break the deadlock, throw the momentum in his favour. But Clearo, I think, saw that coming. Let's see this again. It was a very, very audacious lunge up the inside. Of course, the mission for Dellini was to get the car stopped in time. We saw a slight lock-up on that front right tyre, and up the inside, back through went Pedro Clearo. No concerns, but again, a massive duel breaking out between those two. We had a side-by-side moment as well between the 50 Santalot. That's Maya Verg on her return, and the number 3 just cutting over the chicane there of Enzo Richet as they came through turn 6 and turn 7. And a few more moments there as well at turn 1, as it looked like G4 Racing car has come to a little bit of a standstill. There, that's the 35 of Edu Robinson, who has gone off wide at turn 1. As now we see them make their way through the middle to latter sector part of the course. And indeed, the G4 racing car of Eddie Robinson has come to a stop. So that G4 car will not take any further part in this race. Of course, Eddie Robinson comes from three-part nationality, as a English, Spanish and Italian. The safety car has come out again. And in the final few minutes, that could be all she wrote, folks, of Matteo De Parlo at the front of the rostrum. This will very likely take us to the end of the race. Matteo De Parlo, though, fantastic performance. Regardless, clinical, without question, that's for sure. As now they come down through towards turn 1, 2 minutes and 33 remaining. Pedro Clero also doing very well to defend against the encroaching Enzo Dellini as well. Just managing to think ahead with every move that Dellini tried to pull out of the bag, but it wasn't successful. Important to note as well, Dion Garrett is still the highest placed rookie at the moment in 11th place with the all remaining rookies of Edouard Borgner, Eddie Robinson, of course, who's now stopped, and so is Sakir Al-Malshari, of course, also retiring of the race, and Ian Eichmann's brought his car into the pits earlier in this race 1 here at Hungary. So as they now dip down into the right-hander out of turn 3, and upwards towards turn 4. The Trident driver back on top. And it looks like a second win of the season will be going his way as the Marshal now communicates with Eddie Robinson, who definitely looks forlorn, and for a good reason. This is not the way that any driver would like to start their tenure in a new team or a new championship to kick off his time in the series. And no question, we'll see him back, and he'll take a lot of learning and no doubt progress through his time sat behind this car. As we now take a look at the grandstands, which are really full of people this weekend. We've had such a phenomenal turnout for this weekend here in Hungaroring, here in Magyarország. A wonderful setting, obviously, with the new renovations that the Hungarian circuit has put in place, ready for the Hungarian Grand Prix later on in the year. And, of course, we get in the chance to have a first look at the new grandstand and the areas for the spectators to watch some great racing from, and keep an eye out for the best up-and-coming new talents that will be making their way up through the Formula 3 and Formula 2 ladder for the years to come. And no question, we've got a fantastic crop here with arguably the most competitive season in full swing at the moment. Of course, we mentioned the multiple different winners we have had. We've had 5 different race winners through the course of this season, with Freddie Slater up till now the only driver to register more than 1 victory, with Matteo De Parlo on the cards to equaling that number of 2 with Slater, and in the process retaking the lead of the championship, a lead that he had held coming out of race 1, out of the first weekend at Misano. Of course, the others being Evan Gilter and Enzo Dellini, and of course Pedro Clero will be finishing back on the podium yet again this time, and that will certainly not harm his championship hopes either. In terms of how the points are sitting, of course, Pedro Clero down in 5th, 65 points coming into the weekend, which is essentially places him at the moment 18 points away from Freddie Slater, who leads the championship right now. Of course, that is all going to change as soon as the results get clarified and confirmed at the end of this race. But the timer has ticked to 0, folks. The safety car can confirm is in this lap. So they're undertaking the one final lap now, very soon. They'll get back underway. They come through the right-hander at turn 5. Then in towards the chicane at the middle part of the sector, coming out of Sector 1 into Sector 2. So it's Trident, Van Amersfoort and R-Race making up your top 3 so far. Of course, R-Race have not had a single round since we began racing here back in 2022 without taking at least 1 victory through a weekend. So the pressure now is on Dellini and also Jin Nakamura and Akshay Bora to see whether they can continue that trend that has made them so successful through the course of history. Of course, we Like I said, Hadrian David, a winner here back in 2022 for RSGP, is here this weekend. Of course, getting a chance to catch up with him. Very experienced driver in his time, also taking part in the European Le Mans Series as well, as we now watch the drivers making their way out as the yellow flags remain. Matteo De Paolo picks up the pace as they now head around the final corner at turn 14. And now, as they make their way across the line, they'll put pedal to the metal for the third time in this race. We certainly will get one racing lap in and underway. It's Matteo De Paolo who leads them off, heading down in towards turn 1. It's all on Pedro Clero. It's all or nothing for the remainder of the race now. Freddie Slater knows that. He has a look at the inside of Rashid Al Dahiri, who's currently sat in 4th spot. They now cruise around the final corner, and again Jack Beaton getting swallowed up now, but now under attack is Freddie Slater. He cuts off in front of Yamakoshi, who tries to take him on for P5 in this classification. Was unsuccessful. Rashid Al Dahiri running a little bit wide coming out of turn 3 and then in towards turn 4, but Slater now is going to have to try again elsewhere. There is another heavy braking zone coming in towards turn 12, where there may be an opportunity for that P4 essentially to still be up for grabs, but it's all going to be down to Slater to see whether he can close up to the back of his teammates and whether Rashid Al Dahiri is going to be willing to allow it to happen, and I can't imagine he will be, as they come down in towards turn 6 and 7, back over the curb, skipping around as they go. De Paolo leading them off, with Clero just in 2nd place. Delaney also just hopped up in behind, but so far, once again, Matteo De Paolo, a 3rd perfect. Well, the start was great, the 2nd restart was fantastic, and the 3rd one, brilliant. He's still leading the way, 6/10 clear of Pedro Clero, as though they venture outwards, and again, a little wide moment this time from Yamakoshi in a bid to try and close down to Freddie Slater, but it's all going to be for naught for now. It looks like Rashid Al Dahiri's done enough as they come around turn 13 for the final time here in race 1, and the one final corner remains, and a scene that has not been, well, certainly seen from anybody since Misano to open up the championship. It's going to be Matteo De Paolo and Trident taking victory for a 2nd time this season. A magnificent job from the young Italian, and Maurizio Salvadori's team, and no question going to be celebrating that one. Pedro Clero coming across the line to make yet another podium performance. Well, placing himself onto the 2nd step of the podium for the Van Amersfoort team. Fantastic display from Pedro Clero, defending magnificently against the encroaching Enzo Delaney, who tried countlessly to try and move his way higher up in the podium places. They finished ahead of Rashid Al Dahiri and Freddie Slater. Prema in 4th and 5th, ahead of Hayu Yamakoshi for Van Amersfoort in 6th. There is your race winner, Matteo De Paolo. From lights to flag, there was no stopping him. The young man representing the Trident team with a fantastic performance. Here are your provisional results from race 1, everybody. Matteo De Paolo's a winner for the 2nd time this season for Trident, ahead of Pedro Clero in 2nd. Enzo Delaney in 3rd, Rashid Al Dahiri 4th, Freddie Slater in 5th, Hayu Yamakoshi in 6th, Evan Gilter in 7th, Akshay Bora in 8th, Nanavid Birampakti in 9th, Nikita Bedrin in 10th, Dion Gauda in 11th, Kanato Lei in 12th, Taito Kato 13th, Jin Nakamura in 14th, and Jack Beaton, who had his own fair share of problems at their 15th place. Coming off the back of the checkered flag. Fastest lap was ushered in by Matteo De Paolo at a 1:39.129. Michael Belov 16th, Giovanni Maschio 17th, Zachary David in 18th, Rui Hengye in 19th, Dorian Pan in 20th, with Adieta Kulkani in 21st, Ruiki Liu in 22nd, Javier Segrera in 23rd, Yaroslav Vasalo in 24th, Enzo Riche 25th ahead of Maya Verg, Edouard Borgner in 27th, Edu Robinson was out of the race, as was Sakir Al-Maushari. Edouard Borgner also out, as well as Edu Robinson and Sakir Al-Maushari, and we lost Ian Eichmans, who went into the pits earlier on. But there is your race winner, Trident's very own, the young Italian, Matteo De Paolo, the 17-year-old from Roma in Italy, will stand tall upon the Tata chassis, pump his chest. He's a victor again for the 2nd time this campaign. There's more to come, certainly from De Paolo. No question this is going to put him into the lead of the championship now. Looking ahead to race 2 tomorrow. Of course, another qualifying session will take place in the morning. But congratulations coming from Pedro Clero, the young Brazilian. Once again back, this time a senior member of his team. Of course, Brando Badour now moving into FIA Formula 3.
Man, it's so difficult for me, yeah?
Very difficult, says Pedro Clero. But he did brilliantly to defend against Enzo Delaney in behind. almost effortless, but I bet it was harder inside. But Trident celebrating again. What a breakthrough season this has been for them. They've had great drivers in the past. We include the likes of Roman Belinsky, who has been a staunch member of this Trident team for a long, long time. Spent a great deal of time with the team here in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine. And this is what it means to them. Matteo De Paolo, of course, an Italian driver for an Italian team, winning here at Hungaroring. There is Enzo Dellini. A brilliant performance on his part as well. And you are indeed number one once again, Matteo De Paolo, for the second time this campaign. What a performance. He now ushers himself on. Obviously, the driver's getting weighed in, ready for the podium. We'll be having later on. Let's run through the highlights of that stunning race one to open up our weekend here in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine. It was a great start from Matteo De Paolo, getting off the line very quickly. Pedro Clero looked like he was going to be under attack from Rashid Al-Dahiri around the outside. Also Enzo Dellini with a very aggressive move up the inside. Audacious is the word, I think, managing to cover off the approach from Rashid Al-Dahiri, who was under attack from Freddie Slater as well. It was wheel to wheel coming out of turn two. There was an ART that went off onto the grass as well. Poor Jack Beaton was also right in the thick of the action as he tried to maintain his place just inside the top 10. But it was a great Matteo De Paolo performance. Eventually, we did see the 31 again of Akshay Bora making his way up the inside, trying to attack Evan Giltaire over the higher end places inside the top 6. It was also, well, side-by-side action, which eventually led to the end of a race for the 16 of Sakir Al-Maushari. Contact as well, that was Jack Beaton, who unfortunately got hoovered up coming out of turn 1 after a collision with Nikita Bedrin on the run out of turn 1. Then at turn 2 we saw some more great moments as the 95 ART of Evan Giltaire covered off the approach. But a fantastic victory from Matteo De Paolo to notch his second win on his lapel for this season, with I'm sure many more to come without any question. We can now come across to the podium, where eventually the drivers will take their marks in their respective positions. Matteo De Paolo continuing his rampant run to allow yet another podium finish, also on top of the ones he's already accrued. So that's a 4th podium visit for Matteo De Paolo. Of course, the last 3 races haven't rendered themselves as podium finishes, but he's dispelled all that now with yet another 25 points going his way in the championship. Pedro Clero, great to have him back as well. Like I said at the start of the weekend, has been relatively strong in places. Misano was a really good weekend for him, but unfortunately Spa a scoreless visit. But he's very quickly starting to turn it around, especially at Zandvoort, where he instantly replied after the Spa mishap with an 18-point visit on race 1 at Zandvoort, followed up by a victory in race 2 as well to open up his account for the season. And now he can add yet another batch of 18 points to his championship, marking a 3rd podium in his last 3 races. So not a bad stat at all for Pedro Clero. As now Enzo Dellini stands tall in 3rd. Once again on the podium. He maxed out the weekend in terms of podiums at Spa. Wasn't able to quite do it again at Zandvoort, but another P3 performance to almost replicate race 1 at Spa-Francorchamps for Enzo, and Pedro Clero, the young Brazilian, standing 2nd. And our race winner, Matteo De Paolo, he will stand on the top step for the drivers donning the Pirelli caps. Of course, a fantastic tyre partner for the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine, and Trident also celebrating winning the team's battle out on circuit as well, with De Paolo taking them to the checkered flag. And Dion Gouda, the winning rookie, after finishing 11th overall and currently dominating the Rookies Championship so far as well, and that shows no signs of stopping. The trophy's being presented now to the drivers, with Enzo Dellini receiving his 3rd place trophy. And no doubt more to come from him. Incidentally, all 3 of these drivers very much in the title picture still. Very early days. We've got plenty more rounds to come, of course. The 2nd place trophy going the way of Pedro Clero. And that making it, like we said, 3 podiums in his last 3 races. But I'm sure would love to stand on the top step once again, much like this man, Matteo De Paolo, lifting the winning trophy aloft for a second time this season. That's podium number 4 going to Matteo De Paolo. And the winning team's trophy being presented to Trident for a magnificent display once again. Of course, only celebrating their first win in this series as a team back at Bissana. That was, of course, provided by Matteo De Paolo. Here is the winning rookies trophy to Dion Garda. Yet another one for him as he continues once again his rampant run, clear of everyone else in the rookies classification. And here comes the Italian national anthem. So there we are, Matteo De Paolo, your winner. And looking ahead to the rest of the weekend, more to bring you here at Hungaroring through the course of this visit at Budapest. Of course, we've got qualifying to bring you once again tomorrow morning. Of course, plenty more to come then with the race coming up later on that afternoon. But from all of us here at Hungary, we'll see you next time. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.